Assalamualaikum. My name is Umar Faisal bin Bahari. I'm from BA1183A. Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin my speech, I would like to ask you a few questions. Did you know what happened in Palestine? As you can see on the slide, how do you feel when your house or your school got bombed? How many Palestinian lives should we sacrifice before we act against Israel? The reason why I choose this topic it is because I always follow the development in Palestine. It is sad for me to hear and watch how Israel act against Palestine that totally against international law, and yet there is no action taken. The Palestinians already suffered from the beginning of the conflict in 1948 until now, 2021. Today, I want to talk people should against Israel because Israel is doing colonization, blockading Palestinian, and targeting civilian building. The first reason people should against Israel because Israel is doing colonization. Israel is doing colonization by launching military action on Palestine. For example, in 1948, Israel attacked Palestine and took over West Jerusalem. And in 1967, Israel occupied whole Jerusalem, West Bank, and Syrian Golan Heights. Palestinians have lost many territory to Israel compared in 1947. As you can see on the slide, this shows us that Israel is clearly doing colonization on Palestine and took over almost 80% territory from Palestine. The impact of Israel doing colonization is many innocent Palestinians have lost their life. As you can see on the graph, there are 10,270 Palestinians and 2,356 children have been killed since 2000. This shows us that Israel is clearly killed innocent people, including children. So I already told you about the first reason people should against Israel. That is, Israel is doing colonization on Palestine. Let's continue with the second reason. The second reason people should against Israel because Israel is blockading Palestinians. Israel is blockading Palestinians by blockading electric supply and Palestinian movement. For example, Israel built wall on sea and land to blockading Palestinian movement and cut electric supply on Palestinians. This makes Palestinians to have limited electric supply in their daily life and restrict Palestinians to move freely. The impact of Israel blockading Palestinians is shortage in medical, food, and electric supply. For example, hospitals in Palestine could not be operated because lack of electric supply, and many Palestinians live in hunger because Israel blockading food supply. This shows us that Israel is imposed blockade on Palestine to make Palestinians live in suffer. So I already tell you about the second reason people should against Israel. That is, Israel blockading Palestinians. So let's continue with the last reason people should against Israel. The last reason people should against Israel because Israel is targeting civilian building. Israel is targeting civilian building by using airstrike on civilian building. For example, Israel strike Palestinian hospital and civilian home by using airstrike. The impact of Israel targeting civilian building is the health system become unfunctional and many Palestinians become homeless. For example, the Palestinians could not perform screening COVID-19 and in 2021, 9,000 Palestinians lost their home. This made Palestinians live as homeless and could not control COVID-19 cases after Israel bombed Palestinian home and the only COVID-19 laboratory in Gaza, Al-Rimal Clinic. So I already tell you about three reasons people should against Israel because Israel is doing colonization, blockading Palestinians, and targeting civilian building. In conclusion, people should against Israel because Israel is doing colonization, blockading Palestinians, and targeting civilian buildings. Israel action is clearly against human rights. As you can see on the slide, this Palestinian father crying after his 3-year-old daughter Rahaf Hassan killed by Israel airstrike. So I encourage all people to against Israel to show our solidarity and support towards Palestinians. For example, we can boycott Israel product and make petition to against Israel. I hope that United Nations will punish Israel for what they have done to Palestinians. This is because Israel action on Palestine is clearly against international law. So that's all for me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and thank you.